Hello, everybody. We're live. My name is Shreya, and I'm the founder of bitproject. bitproject is currently our students are in our fourth week of learning how to code with Azure, and we're really lucky because we get to have one of our original mentors, Anthony, on stream today to talk a little bit more about Azure and how we can integrate front end into it, which is what the students are learning this week. Before we dive into the code and what we're learning, Anthony, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, so I am a product manager at Microsoft, working on a few Azure products. One of them is Azure Static Web Apps, and I've also worked on Azure Functions before, and I'm currently also working on a product called Azure Container Apps. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. And we're also really lucky to have an intern from Microsoft join us. Nuzhat, hi, welcome. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Shreya. I am doing great. I am basically interning at Microsoft for the summer. I started in May. I am a fourth year computing and information technology student at Rochester Institute of Technology in New York and an international student from Bangladesh. And I'm just happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining. So today's project is interesting because I think last week you guys started building out a little bit a part of this project. And today we're going to continue building on it and start integrating some sort of front end. Anthony, would you mind walking us through what you were able to cover previously and what our goal is for today?
Yeah, sounds good. So I have up on my screen here the end results of the project that we're going to try to build. So the idea is that we're going to show a map, and then anyone can come to it. Actually, let me just log out of this first so I can show you the full experience. So yeah, so you can actually see a map of basically people's avatars. And then you can actually click on it. And if you're not logged in, it'll actually ask you to log in using GitHub. So I'm already logged into GitHub. So when I click OK, it's just going to redirect me a couple of times. And now I'm actually kind of logged in. And now I can kind of click around on the map and I move around. And if anyone else has this map open, they'll actually see me move around on this map as well. So yeah, so all of this is backed by a serverless API that's running in Azure Functions that is talking to Cosmos DB. So each one of these avatars is actually a document or an item in Cosmos DB that has the person's username, as well as the latitude and longitude. And then each time that I click or anyone clicks on the screen, it's actually updating their own item or document in Cosmos DB with the updated coordinates. So if I wanted to be like in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, I just click there, and then it'll actually save that in Cosmos DB. We can also walk through some of that in a little bit too, just as a recap. So I'll quickly kind of show you the API that we have built. What am I doing? I'm going to VS Code. So the API that we've built is here. I'll minimize everything so it's easier to kind of see. So I have basically two serverless functions here. I know that throughout this camp, we've already kind of done a few things with Azure Functions before, so I won't dive into all the details, but I will point out that we have two functions, one to get all the people that are in Cosmos DB, basically all the documents in Cosmos DB, and return them. And another is to update that person's document in Cosmos DB. And we do this using input and output bindings in Azure Functions. So there's very, very little code that we actually had to write to make this happen. So to get people, we added a binding to our function that basically reads all the documents from Cosmos DB, and then we're just going to go and return it. And as a recap from last week, to add one of these bindings, you just have to right click and say add binding. And then you can actually choose from a bunch of different things that you can, read data from or output data to. I think most of these things are within Azure, but we also support things, I think, like Twilio and then SendGrid and other things. So you can send emails or text messages and things like that straight from your function. So with this binding setup, we named it people. So within here, all we're doing is that we're now taking in the people. So automatically Azure Functions is going to talk to Cosmos DB and pull that data back. So we actually we didn't have to write any code to do this. And then all we're doing is that in the response of the function, we're just returning, literally the result that we got from Cosmos DB. So that's how we kind of built the first API. And then for the second one, same thing. We added an output binding to it so that we can save a new document if that doesn't exist, or we can update a document with this as well. So you can see that I called this binding person. And then within the function, again, it's super simple. We are taking the body of the HTTP request, which actually has like a JSON representation of that person, which is just latitude and longitude and the person's name. And then we're just assigning it to the binding. And then that's it. And then as a kind of like a bonus, I'm also returning it in the HTTP response as well. This part is optional. So yeah, so like really like this is one line of code saves that document to Cosmos DB. And I'll kind of quickly show you what's happening in Cosmos DB as well.
Awesome.
And,
While Anthony's pulling that up, I just want to say, if you have watched last week's video tutorial with Emily, that's great. If you're confused about what Cosmos DB is or databases or anything, Emily and Anthony did have a really awesome, thorough discussion about that in the previous videos. So I'd recommend just chill. Don't worry too much about what's going on. If you have questions, feel free to ask them. But I'd recommend going into that video before trying to build out this part of the project. But yeah, go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, sounds great. So I'm just looking in the Azure portal right now. I've browsed to my Cosmos DB. So this is actually Cosmos DB running in the cloud. I'm using the serverless version of it. So I'm paying like pennies per, I think it's 25 cents per like 1 million transactions or something like that. So it's very cheap. And there's also a free tier as well if you don't want to pay even that. So basically what I have here is I open the people collection that we've been kind of writing data to. So you can actually see that we have 3 people that we wrote to it last week. It's using a different database than what you're seeing here. So which is why you kind of see different people on the live version. But we have 3 people on this one that we built out last week. And so I'll kind of quickly show you the API working before we show you how to deploy it. So within VS Code, if I just press F5, it's going to run my Azure Functions app. And it's going to take about a few seconds to start up. And then I can also set breakpoints and stuff if I wanted to here. I know in the camp, we've been using Postman to make our HTTP requests.
Yeah.
But last week, I also showed that even within VS Code, if you install an extension called REST client or something like that, REST client, you can do stuff like this. We can save a file called something.http, and you can just paste in your HTTP request in here. So in this case, I have an HTTP request going to my local version of Azure Functions that's currently running that I started up down here. And it's just going to call, it's going to go and try to get all the people back from that API. So I'm going to press send. And you can see that it actually hits my breakpoint. I can actually inspect the data that I got back from Cosmos. If I want to make any changes or kind of like try things out here, I can. And I can skip over stuff and then just press, play, and then it's going to finish. And this is the results of the API call. So it pulled back all the data from Cosmos DB. So you can see the 3 documents that we wrote last week. So, what I'll kind of quickly do is show you how to call the other API as well. If I can find it again, it's right here. So the creator update person, you pretty much use it the same way, except that instead of using an HTTP GET, you're using POST, and I'm passing some JSON data to it. So I'm just gonna give it something. So I'm gonna actually change this to Nuzhat. And I'll just give it some longitude and latitude. I don't know where this is, so maybe I'll just put her in the middle of the map, and then I'll click send. And then you can see that it ran. And if I went and ran this previous HTTP request, you should be able to see now 4 documents in here that came back. So there's Nuzhat. So in the data that we saved, it'll even include some extra stuff that Cosmos DB adds in. You can just ignore them. And then just to kind of show that it worked in here, as we would kind of expect. If I refresh it, I can see Nuzhat in the database here as well. So that's kind of what we built out last week. We did not actually deploy it. So I think we can probably start off this week by deploying it. But any questions so far?
Yes, we do have a brief question about just databases. What is the advantage of using Cosmos over any other database?
So I think there's a few. So I think last week we kind of covered the different flavors of databases, mainly, the relational databases and non-relational databases. So relational databases are things like MySQL, Postgres, Microsoft SQL. There's a bunch of other ones as well, where you have a bunch of tables and then you can write SQL queries to query them. Their advantages is that they're very structured. You can define tables and with like very specific columns in it. So, and actually our app would actually work quite well with it because we have some very defined columns in our table. We have basically somebody's name, longitude, and latitude. So I think for this particular project, it would have been, it would have worked just as well in a relational database. Some of the advantages that we're kind of using here are more in terms of like working with it from Azure Functions. It has a like an input and output binding in Azure Functions so that it helps us kind of read and write these documents without doing a lot of work. There is now a Microsoft SQL binding that's also in that's currently in preview that will do this for SQL Server as well. So that's one advantage. And then another advantage is that Cosmos DB actually has a really generous free tier. So if you're creating your first Cosmos DB in your subscription, you can actually choose to say like, give me the free tier. And as long as you stay below this threshold of like, I think it's something like 1,000 request units per second, which is actually really, really generous. Like we saw last week that when we ran, like for instance, if we go and run, I forgot what I was seeing this before, but last week we saw that we ran one of these requests. It costs us like 2 request units. So if you kind of imagine, 1,000 request units per second, you can actually run this request 500 times per second, and it would be totally, within the free tier. So, so like it has a free tier, and also, like look, if you're like me, you kind of created one using the free tier already. You can also use what's called the serverless tier, which you kind of pay by like, I think, per million request units, and I think 1 million request units was something like 25 cents. So again, it's almost free. So like those are kind of like the reasons why I chose it. I don't really have to think about what size of a database that I want, and also I'm not choosing a size and then paying for that size, but I'm not using all of it. It's literally just charging me what I need if I'm not using the free tier. So those are the main reasons. Very long-winded reason.
Yeah. And I will quickly add over here that if you're a student in the serverless camp and you do end up passing the free tier by any chance, just feel free to reach out to our team and we'll make sure that you don't have to pay for anything. But yeah, you mentioned that you want to start by first deploying this and then kind of getting into the code a little bit. So I'm going to let you guys go ahead and take over.
Yeah, let's do that. So what we're going to do is stop this thing. So I'll do a couple of things here. So currently what I have is I have a folder with my project in it, and it just has the function app in it. So so the first thing that I want to do, actually probably before I do anything, is commit it to source control or commit it to Git first, so that I don't lose anything, or if I make any mistakes, I can come back. Sure. So now what just happened? That was not my initial commit. There we go. Okay, so I've just committed that to Git. So so now I can make some changes, and if I make a mistake, I can come back. So the first thing I'm going to do is, so far this is the function app, and we actually want 2 apps here. So one is the function app, and then the other is kind of how we're going to build out that front end, this this map kind of front end thing here. So that's going to need its own folder. So what I'm going to do is I will create a folder, and we'll call this API. And I'm going to move everything from here, except for this, into API. Okay, so our function app now lives inside this little API folder here. And I'm going to create another folder. We're going to call this app. And then I'll create a file in here called index.html. So there's many ways to write your front-end app. If you know React or Vue or Angular or one of the many different frameworks that you can use that. But what we're going to do today is we're literally going to use we're going to build a literal single-page application. It's only going to have an index.html file, and that's partly because I'm lazy. And it might be easier for the stream. And you can also see exactly what we're doing. So we're not hiding anything with React or Vue or anything like that. You're actually going to see the raw JavaScripts that are actually making the calls and actually putting stuff on the screen. So in here, I just want a very empty file. So in VS Code, there's a bunch of snippets that I can use. I literally just type doc and tab, and then it just kind of scaffolded out an HTML file for me. And I'm just going to say, hello, bit project, and save that. So this is what we're going to try to deploy first. So the idea is I think y'all are going to be starting your final projects soon, I think within the next week. And this is typically what I would kind of recommend folks do is as quickly as possible when you start a project, start deploying it. So that you don't have to basically build out this thing. And then at the very end, on the last day, you're like, well, how do I deploy this? I don't know how to deploy this. Actually flip it around and deploy something really simple that you can add to, so that every time now when you kind of make a change, you can deploy it and deploy it and deploy it. So you don't have to wait till the very end to realize that you can't deploy something because you did something a little bit differently. So just a little pro tip here from an older person to kind of let you know that that the deploying first is a good thing. So what I'm going to do now is I will commit this as well. So I'm going to basically add front end. This. So I need to publish this somewhere, and I need to go find an email from Nuzhat on a repo. Bring that over here. Over here. All right, so Nuzhat has already kind of created a GitHub repo for me. It's empty, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to literally, push my app to it. So I can push to it from VS Code, or I can just take this and paste it into my terminal. Here, I could have just done the same with clicking that button, but I'll just paste this in. So it's going to add the origin and all that, and set the branch to main and push main. So it's done that. So now if I flip back over, you can see that our app is now up there. So what we can probably do now is maybe switch over to Nuzhat's screen if she's ready. If you're not ready, we can just chat.
No, that's cool.
And she's going to show us how to deploy this to Azure Static Web Apps. And maybe before we even talk about Azure Static Web or deploying it, do you want to talk a little bit about Azure Static Web Apps?
Yeah, but thank you so much for showing all of that. I honestly didn't even know how all of that works. I just know about the static web app part, which is where I'm interning for this summer as a PM. So I primarily know that little piece of it. So just having this introduction today as to how the API connection works is awesome. So what Azure Static Web Apps is doing is essentially automatically building and deploying a full stack web application from a code repo. So what we've done here first is on my GitHub, I went ahead and created an empty repo that Anthony pushed to. So I'm going to share my screen. Share screen.
Yeah, and while Nuzhat's kind of sharing her screen, this is why we thought it was a good idea to introduce static web apps here is because one of the things that static web apps does pretty well is the hosting of like what we call a static website, which could be what I have here, which is like literally a single HTML file, or it could be a pretty like elaborate application that was built in maybe React or Vue or Next, or any of your kind of favorite frameworks, and it's going to host that really well. And it also allows you to kind of host at the same time in Azure Functions API. So instead of like having to deploy Azure Functions API somewhere and then deploying your static front end somewhere, you can actually deploy them at the same time, which is what Nuzhat's going to show us. So less things to manage. And also, again, there's you can pretty much do everything that we're doing today in the free tier of static web apps as well. So you shouldn't have to pay anything for it.
Yeah, and I know that bitproject is also allowing access to items that are not free. So if you do end up exploring more to Azure Static Web Apps, I know some other cool features that matters to me as a cybersecurity student is also the free SSL certificates, authentication provider integrations with Azure Active Directory, GitHub, and also like customizable authorization for like role-based definitions and assignments. So I think there's a lot more static web apps that is fun to explore. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and show you how I will. So first of all, I will go to the Azure portal and kind of, you see I'm logged in. So from the resources that are available to me, I'm going to go ahead and click on static web apps and press create. Now that will pop open this little page where I am able to specify the details of creating my static web app from whichever repo that I want to, my subscription and so on. So the first thing that it asks for is subscription. For resource group, you can really name it anything that helps you, like if you're building and so on, and later on, this is the piece that will help you. So I'm just going to name it. I'm going to select an existing one. It's just a test one that I created, or I could just create a new one. Maybe I can name it front end. Okay, cool. And for my static web app, I'm going to name it GithubMap front end. You can really name it anything you want, but I think it's easiest to be a little descriptive. We're going to keep it at the free tier for this. As for location, it's not really based on where you are located, rather where they're hosted. So I will go ahead and select Central US. Maybe Anthony can talk more to that in a bit. But I've gone ahead and connected my GitHub to it. This is my personal GitHub account, which I've connected here. You should be able to do the same with yours and select an organization. I'm going to go ahead and select mine. For the repo, again, this is the one that we've created. It's empty, the one that Anthony pushed to. So this is the one that I'm going to select. So GitHub, map front end, and branch, we're just going to keep it at main. Now, in terms of build details, I'm going to go ahead and select custom because we're not, for this particular live stream, we did not select a framework. We are creating that single page web app with only the index.html. So I will go ahead and select custom. As for the app location, remind me, was that the front end?
No, I changed it on you today. It's called app today.
Okay, cool. And for API location, I'm just going to do that.
Yep.
As for output, I'm going to leave that open, but when you're working with frameworks, I know typically you might have like a build directory. So yeah, so far, does this look good, Anthony?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay.
If you don't mind, Control Plus just to increase the size just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so like this is all the information that you need. You kind of mentioned the region earlier. Static web apps actually distributes your static assets all over the world globally for you already, so that if somebody's accessing your site in Asia, it's actually going to see it as fast as somebody accessing it in North America or Australia or something like that. The region that you select here is more for where the function app is hosted. So there's still a little bit of an effect. Like you still want to choose where a location is closest to where most of your end users are going to be using. But for the most part, the important pieces of static web apps are globally distributed.
Yeah, thank you so much for explaining that. I'm going to go ahead and hit next for tags. Now, this is where we've selected a free version, so I'm not sure if we need to essentially put in a tag here, but as it mentions here, it helps with billing and so on. But for now, we're going to skip this. And now we're going to review and create. As you can see, it's working, it's working. All right. Hopefully everything is in place and I won't break anything. Create. It's actually super fast. It does it pretty well. There you go. Go to. All right, so as you can see, there's you can see details for your static web app. You can also go to the resource and be able to see more. It should actually show you a URL to access it as well. Like for example here, the Redgrass one. So we're going to copy it. What's nice is that there's so many like details to the analytics and so on once you start working with it. But we're going to go ahead and copy this URL and try visiting it and see what happens. All right, so right now it's telling us that it's live and waiting for content, which is great because that's what we're going to do. We're going to be pushing the content to it. And since we are deploying from this repo, I'm going to go ahead and refresh my repo on GitHub and see, first of all, the changes that Anthony pushed on there. And I should be able to see the progress that it's having.
Yeah, actually, before you you kind of show that, this is actually if you can control plus this as well to make this a little bit bigger. What the static web apps creation process also did for us is you can see that there's now a third folder that was added. So if you click on the workflows folder, it actually added what's called a GitHub Actions workflow automatically for us. And if you can actually click into that YAML file, you don't have to really understand this YAML unless you want to make some changes or, or for some reason something goes wrong. But for the most part, you don't have to kind of worry about what's in here. It basically tells GitHub how to build and deploy your app. And we're able to detect really, all the popular frameworks. So if you're using any of the JavaScript frameworks, or you have like a blog using Hugo or some other kind of blogging, kind of like a static blogging engine, it knows how to build it out of the box. So it's quite powerful that way. So sorry, I just want to call that out before you go to the actions. But the existence of this file is what actually builds and deploys your app every time we push now to this repo.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for explaining that because I know that it's hard to go through all the steps without really know what it's going. And the best thing we can do as coders is really to explore. And worst case scenario, we can all just Google what each of these pieces mean. So it's nice to have that introduction. So for now, what I am going to go ahead and do is click on actions because we want to see the build. And as it's showing me that it's done. So hopefully this should... All right, cool. We have this awesome Bit project app right now that's deployed. This is successful. So Anthony, if you want to go ahead and explain more as to what's happening.
Yeah, you bet. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, we had two folders, one called app and one called API. So what you're seeing here is the contents of the app folder, which is a pretty boring HTML file. But you will also, if you access any route in this application under /API. So if you don't mind typing /API/get people. Currently it's not working, but you can see that it's a different error message. It's an error 500. So it's actually hitting our Azure Function app. So that's actually expected. So one of the things that we had configured last week was in order for the Cosmos DB binding to be able to talk to Cosmos DB, we had to configure a connection string. And locally on my computer, I had that set up. But what we haven't done yet is doing this with Nuzhat's computer, or sort of the app that Nuzhat has created in Azure. So it doesn't know how to talk to Cosmos DB yet because we haven't told it which Cosmos DB to use. So we're gonna now do that, to add that. So Nuzhat, if you don't mind going back to your Azure portal.
Mm-hmm.
And then
one.
Yeah. And then go into configuration and then click add. So we're actually going to add an app setting here, and we're going to try to do this off screen. So Shreya, if you don't mind hiding Nuzhat's screen so that we don't have to lose any secrets here. So what I'm actually going to do is like something that you should never do. I'm going to send Nuzhat a what's called a connection string to Cosmos DB. And I'm stalling right now because I'm looking for it. I'm going to send Nuzhat a what's called a connection string in Cosmos DB. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it in the private chat that's in StreamYard. So Nuzhat, if you don't mind copying that and pasting that into the value of the app setting. And then I'll also send you the name of the app setting.
Yep.
And the app setting itself has a funny name because that was the name that was generated in VS Code. I could have changed it, but I didn't. So we're kind of stuck with this funny name. And then, and then after you've kind of entered those in and click save.
Yep, I'm on it. All right. So now I go ahead and press OK after entering the details of the connection string that Anthony has sent me.
And then let us know when the screen is ready to be shown again.
Well,
is it ready?
Save. It's loading. Share my screen again. Share screen. Let me know if you guys are.
Is it ready to be shown?
It crashed on me.
Oh no.
Oh no. Share screen. All right. Hopefully this works now. All right. Okay. So we are back.
Nice. So let's refresh that. Oh, actually, no. Yeah, that is perfect. Let's look at what we've done here. We added an app setting. We don't have to look at the value because that's what the secret is. But basically now the application knows how to talk to Cosmos DB. So so now that's done, we can let's head over to this page and just refresh.
Drum roll. Yay.
There we go. It actually pulled back the documents. So it's all working the same way as it does locally on my machine. So now we have this thing deployed. It's obviously not doing a heck of a lot. The API works, but we don't have a front end. So I think that's where we're going to spend the rest of the stream building out. So I don't know if, like Shreya, that there's been any questions that you have or anyone else has asked. But yeah, we can take those now, or we can kind of just start building out the app.
I do think we had a couple of questions about what type of, this was like early on, what type of front-end frameworks you recommend using with Azure, with the type of project you're building today.
I don't really have, well, actually I do have a favorite, but I want to hear what Nuzhat's favorite is.
I mean, in terms of frameworks, I'm always caught between either Angular or React, but that's just because I started with those. I know it also supports Blazor, which is a little more uncommon, more on the C# side of things, but I'm definitely a super front-end and JavaScript person, so I really enjoy working with Angular and React. I hope that was
nice. And John Galloway, our good friend, saying say Blazor, say Blazor, say Blazor. So I'll actually mention two frameworks that I love working with that are different from Nuzhat's, and one is Blazor WebAssembly. So WebAssembly is a fairly new technology that's really kind of available in all browsers now. And so far, to build a front end app, you needed to know JavaScript, which is great for a lot of people, but for some folks in the .NET ecosystem, for example, who don't know a lot of JavaScript or they don't want to learn it. They want to kind of stay within C# and actually share code between their front end and back end. there's a framework called Blazor that is not very mature, and it actually compiles your .NET code into WebAssembly and runs it in the browser. So now you're able to actually really build these like kind of really rich client experiences in the browser using C# in this case, and yeah, and you can basically build anything that you could with React, but using using .NET and C#. And then actually my favorite JavaScript framework currently is Vue. So between myself and Nuzhat, we actually covered the top 3 JavaScript frameworks, I would say. And there's also like things that are built on top of React and Vue. A very popular one is called Next, which is like a framework that's built on top of React. So a lot of the routing and stuff are all built in. And and I see Mark. I think he's one of our mentors.
Yeah.
Saying hello.
Yeah.
And yeah, and also there's one called Next, which is kind of like Next but powered by Vue. So a lot of different choices out there. I'm sure between the time that the stream started and now, probably 3 more have sprung up, and are probably on Hacker News somewhere. So. So yeah, so we support pretty much anything, and even if it's something that we don't support, because it is a GitHub action. So actually, if you don't mind sharing my screen.
Yeah.
So what I've done here is I've basically just opened up the repo that we push to, and because it is just a GitHub action thing, which you're basically just describing a bunch of steps to build and deploy your app. Right now, this step here that does everything you need to kind of build and deploy a very typical, Angular, React, Vue, Blazor, Jekyll, Hugo, Gatsby, you name it, app. But you might have like some framework out there that we don't support, or you want to build your app a very custom way. You can actually just add steps before to build it. So if you want to, install, Ruby and then kind of build your own kind of Jekyll app ahead of time, or like basically in a separate step, and just you use our task to deploy it, you can totally do that. So, so like in a sense, anything that can compile or basically build to a bunch of static resources, you can run on Azure Static Web Apps.
Awesome. And we did have another question when you were working with the keys about whether you could point the config constraint to the Azure Key Vault.
Not yet, but we hope to have this hopefully in the next, I don't want to commit to a date, but in the next few months.
Yeah.
And you can define few, but
yeah. John Galway did also share some documentation about that. So if you want to go check that out, you can. But yeah, I'll let you guys go ahead and continue with the code.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, actually, I'll have to call it one thing though. The key vault secrets in static web apps right now only work in certain situations. So in order to like that connection string scenario actually will not work currently. So hopefully we have to have that documented well-ish. If not, we'll need to update that. But the goal is eventually that will just work everywhere. Currently there's a limitation where it doesn't work in the function app. So yeah, so let's work on building out this app. What am I doing? Okay, so I have the app here. So I'm actually going to go and pull down the latest changes in the repo, and the latest changes would be basically the addition of this workflow file that was already created for us. So now I have the latest, and what I want to do is turn this really boring HTML file into something that renders a map. So for this, I'm going to use a product called Azure Maps, but you're free to use like really anything. Like, so if you want to use Google Maps or anything else you find out there, you can. But I chose to use Azure Maps because a lot of folks in this camp already have an Azure subscription, and it's pretty easy to kind of create one of those Azure Map subscriptions as well. So what I did here, oh no, I just showed my connection string. Well, I guess I didn't show the end. Okay, so you know most of my connection string. So all this work we did to hide the connection string.
No. We worked really hard on it.
We gotta burn this thing down.
Another monitor for this.
I know. This is just rookie mistake. My bad. All right. So people are going to now like, spend the rest of this thing trying to guess the last 4 characters of my connection string. So what you can do is you can go and create a resource, search for Azure Maps. And you can choose that and say, basically, wait for the dots to disappear. Yeah, you're just going to fill out, hey, I want Azure Maps, click create. I think I already have one, so I'm not going to create another one. So Azure Maps, I should have. I think that this is the one that I created for the live demo, and I'll just reuse it. So, at the end of the day, what you get when you create one of these Azure Maps accounts is you get a key. And this one I'm okay kind of showing you because I'm actually embedding this in my HTML, which is not actually like the preferred or recommended way to do this. Ideally you kind of keep this thing as a secret as well. But whatever. This is a little bit easier to get started. Ideally, if you kind of build up this app that you're going to host, in production, that you kind of do this other Active Directory kind of way of authenticating. But I'll just keep it simple and use the key. So I'm going to show you this now because you're going to see this later anyway. So and this key is what's going to allow your app to access Azure Maps. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to literally Google Azure Maps getting started. And yeah, you can see there's a purple one here. So I already kind of did this last week. So I'm going to walk you through my process and how I kind of figured out how to build this app. So I just literally Googled and looked at the very first result. And it happens to be a really good set of instructions on how to create a map in a web page. I'm supposed to do this, that, and the other. And then what I realized is at the end, it actually gave me the full results. So obviously, when you kind of go through one of these things, you kind of want to read through and see what, every step that it's doing. But I'm just literally going to be super lazy and just copy this thing at the very end. And then I'm going to paste it into my page. And I'm going to format it so it looks pretty. And yeah, this looks pretty good. I have no idea what it's doing, but I assume that it's correct. So there's one thing here. It says, give me your key. So I'm going to now take the key that's in the portal, copy that, and then paste it here. So now what I can do now is I can basically run this HTML file locally. There's a few ways to do it. I can go to my Windows Explorer, or in this case Finder, and double click on it. It'll probably open up in the browser. But there are tools for actually running web pages, static web pages locally. If you have Python installed, you can go python-m http.server and then the location you want to serve, and it'll start up a web server serving you files. There's many ways to do it. And Static Web Apps actually shipped a command line tool that allows you to run basically a static web app locally, including the front end and the back end together, so that you don't have to deploy your app to actually see it working properly. So I'll kind of show you how that works. So I'm going to open up the terminal. I'll clear everything out. And I already have the Static Web Apps CLI installed. But if you don't, you just search for Azure Static Web Apps CLI. And then I happen to land on the GitHub page for it, which is totally fine. And it'll give you the instructions on how to install it. So npm install that. So that's what I kind of ran. I already have it installed. So if I go SWA, oh shoot, it actually tried to start the thing. Stop. SWA-h. You can see all the things that it can do. But what I'm going to try to do now is just start my app in the front end. So I'm going to go see if I can make this bigger slightly. Whoa, that's really big. I'll go SWA start, and then I'll give it the folder name, which is app. And it's going to go and start up the emulator. We got this giant message here. It's something that probably our lawyers told us that we had to put in. That's, like, this is really helpful for you to test your thing locally, but, you should really test your app in the cloud, if you want to make sure that it's really working. But anyway, it's kind of started it, and I can go ahead and press this thing here. So now I have it's actually working. So like it loaded up my HTML page. It's actually rendering the app here. And I can actually show you how I can start both the front end and the back end together. So this is the command I ran before, swa start app. Actually kind of clear that so you can see it better. Swa start app. And I want to say bash API location API. So if I've done that properly, I hope, and press enter, what it's not going to do is it's going to start both the front end as well as my Azure Function application that's in the API folder. Is it doing it? Yeah, it is. So you can see that the function app has started. So now when I go back to my browser, and if I refresh it, it should still work, which is expected. If I go to /API/get people, you can see that it's actually calling my API. So it's kind of like just like what how static web apps works in the cloud, but locally now. So depending on the route that I'm hitting on my app, it's either hitting the function app or it's hitting my front end app. So now I'm actually able to use this to iterate pretty quickly on my application. So does that make sense so far? Hopefully, yes. Okay. Okay, so let's see what we should do next. Okay, let's do some stuff now. So in Azure Maps, there are yes, where's my little script thing? Oh, there it is. So there's a little script thing here. So this function is run whenever the page loads, and it's going to go basically initialize the map, and it's just going to turn this div into a map. And the reason why the map is a full screen is because it's been kind of configured to be, the full size of the viewport. Yeah, so let me hide the side thing so you see more stuff here. So we can actually now do stuff to it. So I actually don't know how to do it. So I'm actually going to go and Google some more. So I want to add markers to my app. So so I want to say Azure Maps, I think like image markers or something. Yeah, so I think like you can look at various things. I think the one that I landed on is this particular page here, where I can basically put any HTML onto the page. So the Azure Maps docs actually has really good interactive like thingy here, like demo. So you can do like all sorts of things here. So like say for example, let's see, what am I looking at here? So there's an HTML marker. Where's the thing that I was looking at before? Okay, yeah, I'm looking for the word HTML content. So, so typically you would read a bunch of documentation and land on something. So, so what I kind of realized that you could do is, let's take this example here. For a map here, you can actually go and set any HTML content. So look, this looks like it's basically a pin, but I can actually say I want a div of it says hello, right? And it's going to like live update. So you can see that I can actually place a hello on the map anywhere. So that's great. So and the next thing that we want to do is like what we actually want to do is actually put someone's face on the map. So the next thing I kind of did was like basically GitHub avatar URL or something. I forgot where I found this, but anyway, what I found out from Googling is that if I went to just kind of like my name or anyone's name, if I just put the word a .png extension after anyone's GitHub username, you get there. Oh, that's way too big. But you kind of get the like an avatar for the person. And what I also learned from Googling is that you can actually say size equal. So I can say size equal 40, and that's a much like more tolerable version of me. So I'm going to go ahead and take that piece of information, a PNG, size equal 40, copy it. So now I'm going to go back to my little thing here and turn this back into an image tag. You can see it placed me on the map. So this is exactly what we want. So now we know that this is the code that we want to steal. So another thing that we want to do is figure out how to do stuff when a map is ready. So so hopefully somewhere here it tells us how to do something. Yeah, so see, it says like, wait until map resources are ready. So so I'm actually going to go ahead and just steal this chunk here. I don't even know what it does, but I know it does something that I want. So I'm going to come over here and say, just paste this in. And yeah, it's doing some stuff. I don't really care about what stuff it's doing, but maybe I wanted to say alerts, hello. Just to kind of test this out. So basically what I would expect to happen is when the map is loaded, I'll get an alert. So I'm going to go back to my page and go here and refresh. And there we go. It says hello. It's not fully loaded. Okay, well, I think it's close enough. So yeah, so that's kind of where I want to insert my code, because I want to do some stuff when, and you can see GitHub Copilot kicking in and saying that maybe this is what I want. Actually, this is really close to the code I want to type. How does it know this?
Wow, that's fancy.
Well, let's see if it works first before we get too excited. But oh my goodness, how does it know this?
It worked. See,
Yeah, so I didn't even have to look it up. So maybe the first thing you need to do is just ask Copilot what code you want to write. So this is actually exactly what I want to write. So remember that image tag that I wanted earlier. Where did I put it? I guess I could type it again, but you don't want to watch me type. Take this, copy this, put it over here, and stick it in as that image content. Nope, I need to wrap it in quotes. And here we go. Now, if I go and refresh this page, you should see it's on there. We're already kind of like almost there, right? So now what we want to do is actually let's think about what we want to do next. So so now we know how to put someone's face onto the map. So this is the user ID, right? And this is the longitude and latitude. Or did I get that mixed up? I think that's right. And yeah, so that we have all that information in our Cosmos DB, right? So now I think what we need to do is call our API so that we can pull back those records or those documents and actually render them onto the screen. So let's see if we can do that. So I'll do a few things here. So before we add any markers onto the page, we will stop it. We will first kind of fetch. Actually, maybe it'll help me fetch people from the API. That's actually pretty close too. So what we want to do here is, instead of fetching it from this weird URL, I don't even know where that goes, I am going to call just /API/get people. And that's another great thing about running your app in Azure Static Web Apps, is that because your API is hosted in the same place, you actually don't have to prefix it with some other domain name of where your API is actually hosted. You just say it /API/get people, and it's just going to get it from the same domain name. And you actually don't have to run into, you actually don't end up having to deal with this thing called CORS, which is cross-origin resource sharing. It's kind of like a restriction in the browser that kind of prevents, like a web page from calling, another domain without that domain explicitly giving access to it. So basically like that. That's another great thing about hosting your app on static web apps instead of separately, like a function app here and your kind of your static file somewhere else. So I'm just going to read through this. So what this call is going to do, it's going to call get people. It's going to parse the JSON, which is exactly what we want. And then it's going to do some stuff. It's actually going to, it's actually pretty close to what we want. So then it says for each of these, we're going to add it to a marker. I think that's actually going to do the right thing, but I'm going to change a couple of things here. I don't really love the chaining of these promises. So I will do something else. So I will use this feature of JavaScript called async await, which requires me to tag this function async. So async await, it's probably a more friendly way of working with promises in JavaScript, so that you don't have to have all these thens and catches and stuff and chain them together and figure out what they're doing. You can almost write your code sequentially. It's a lot to cover here, so I'm not sure whether promises have been covered in the camp so far. But it's something really cool to read up on. So we don't have to call .then and all that stuff if we don't want to. So we can say const response equals await, and that's basically going to give us the response in here. You can even see that the IntelliSense is telling me that's a response. And then I'm going to need to get the JSON from the response, and that's the actual people that I want. So I'm going to say const people. Oh my gosh, did it just?
It knows. It knows.
Does it actually have access to my mic or something?
That would be pretty cool too.
Or is it? That's actually pretty scary. But yeah, so actually this is what I need. This is wild. So I'm gonna go ahead and so now what I have here, what I should have here, this is an array. It even knows that I want to create a marker for each person, which is like, is it gonna do it? Oh.
It did.
It did do it. Okay. Well, I don't need this anymore. Maybe. See if I do. So it's going to create an HTML marker. Oh my gosh. Yeah, this is pretty close to what I want. Oh, it even has the URL. Wow. How does it know that? I am going to take this content here because I know that this works and change this out. So I'm going to use string interpolation to change out this part here. So I'm going to call this, so this will be person dot, I think it's ID. This is the ID. And that should just work. So it's going to basically build out a URL that's github.com/ whoever the person's name is. And then that's the thing. So latitude, longitude.
No,
isn't this longitude?
It's longitude and latitude.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're seeing this. There's a little bit of a discussion in the chat about whether it's longitude first or latitude. So I went ahead and checked.
Thanks
so
for that.
It's longitude first.
Yeah, thanks. Oh my gosh. So this might actually, I don't even want a click thing here. Okay. Maybe I want this some other day. And I'm going to add a marker. Is that just going to do it? Is the chat saying this is going to work? We don't know. No. There's too many things going on in the chat. I'm just going to go ahead and just refresh this and see if it does anything. I probably made a mistake. Oh, and also I think I put everyone in the middle of the ocean somewhere. Oh, wow. This thing's huge. Why is it so huge? I made a mistake. So somebody's thing is here. I don't know what happened. Why is this so huge?
What if I told you the wrong thing? What if it's latitude first?
No, I think it's fine. I think it's in the middle of the ocean, which is what I expected. But like, it's kind of like there. Like, doesn't this work? Like, what's going on here? Okay, we'll kind of debug this. Did not expect that to happen. So yeah, size equals 40. It's huge. Why is this so huge?
Maybe the co-pilot messed up.
Oh, actually, no, it's right here. It's fine. It's not huge. This one's
But
huge.
this one is.
Oh, who is this person? I gotta get rid of this person.
Oh no.
Okay, so this, for some reason, this thing did not actually render. Actually, you know what? I'll do some HTML 1.0 stuff. So if you grew up in the 90s, you'll know how to do this. Width equals 40 and height equals 40.
Not the styling.
And anyone else who grew up in the CSS age, they'll be like, what the heck is this guy doing? So let's see if this actually did anything.
That's me right now.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so we plotted some stuff. We actually have some people on top of each other. I don't even know who that is. Did somebody actually like access the API and started adding themselves?
Wow.
Or that might be some other Nuzhat, to be honest.
I
So
doubt.
let's figure this out. I don't know. We did publish it, so maybe somebody actually figured out how to call API. That is not the first time somebody messed with one of my demos, in a good way, if that's what they did.
You're being proactive.
Yeah. Just don't do anything bad in there. That's all. And I think that's the part we're going to do next, because you mentioned that static web app supports authentication. So we're going to add authentication so that you can only mess around with yours and not someone else's data. But anyway, let me just take a look
But
at
the
what's
other
going
two
on.
that's showing up, I think that's Emily and Ganning, because I see it in your API/get people, because it's not just.
Oh yeah,
That's
yeah. I think there's actually, you know what? I know why, because I just basically put their first names in there. That's actually not their actual names. So so I don't. So maybe I'll just delete some of these and just add them again. How do I delete something?
I was right. It's longitude first. I was so nervous that I confidently said the wrong thing.
50-50 chance. So just go with it. Just own it. All right. What's your GitHub handle, Nuzhat?
It's Nuzhat Minhaz. So first name - last name.
And no Copilot here. What am I gonna do? How you spell it? I don't even know how to do this anymore. I think we're like minus 121. No, that's yeah, that is longitude. And then did we use strings before? I don't even remember if we were using strings. Did we use strings?
I think so. I just know that the latitude is somewhere around 50s.
Okay, well, if this is wrong, we'll fix it.
So I don't think we're using strings for the numbers. For the longitude and latitude, I don't think so. I think they're just numbers.
Okay, cool. And I think we're like 48 or something, roughly. I'm gonna save it, and then let's reload our little map here. Where are you? See, there you are.
Yay!
All right, right on. Okay. So here we go. Here we are on the map. So we kind of like, already did a lot of this work already. I'm almost, at a good enough place where we can push this. I do want to do a couple of things. One is to try to fix the zoom level of the thing, so I don't have to keep zooming out every time. Does it help me here? So like, let's see, like with a zoom level of like, say 1 or 3. Let's try 3. What does that do?
I think it would have been 1 to be able to see the entire map, right?
Yeah. Do that. There we go. Entire map. Yep. Excellent point. Okay. So so that's that. Yeah, I think we're in a pretty good shape. So let's just push this. Hopefully nobody has a problem with me pushing a subscription key to GitHub. So we're going to say add map. Take that off and then sync it. And then what happens now is if we go back to Nuzhat's repo that I pushed to, my changes are there, add map. And you can also see that it actually kicked off a GitHub action run. So if you like watching text scroll across the screen, you can just stare at this all day and watch it build. But it's going to take about a couple of minutes to build the front end app, which actually doesn't do anything because it's just an HTML file. But it's also going to build the Azure Function app and then deploy that to Azure Static Web Apps. So we're just going to wait. So one of the reasons why we thought it'd be great to have you on is that a lot of the folks watching the stream are students.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you have like any, like, you know, if you want to talk about kind of like your journey to your current internship, because I know you had other internships before. Yeah, like if you want to talk about anything like that people might want to know about.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I started in the tech world just not even knowing any form of code, meaning as an international student from Bangladesh, I picked computer science as a major, thinking that that would teach me everything that I need to know about tech and then be able to get into the field or the industry. But turns out computer science was very specific to backend code, or at least that's how I felt at the beginning. So I switched out to a major that is kind of like a mixture of like computer science, IT, that teaches us a lot of like front end, back end design, security, databases, and a lot more across the stack so that I could get introduced to each of those. So for my first internship, I really wanted to get a strong hold on that, you know, that world of coding, know how even like, you know, Git works, like, you know, pull requests and so on. So my first internship was at Wegmans. It's a company based out of the East Coast, essentially, actually based out of Rochester, where I go to school. It's like groceries, pharmaceuticals, and basically just anybody living in the Rochester area finds that to be like, you know, like home. It's almost like Trader Joe's and Walmart mixed together. It's wonderful. So that's where I interned for my first internship as a web software developer. And so that's where I actually learned about Blazor. I also learned about Angular. So those were primarily like the two frameworks that I was working with. And then for my second internship, I wanted to kind of get in my comfort zone. So I was a designer. So I was working at Constellation Brands. For those of you who don't know Constellation Brands, I'm sure you've heard of Corona Beer or Svedka or essentially a lot of the alcohol that you know about, but this is at the parent company. And they
Hey,
have...
hold on. There's high school students in this stream. You did not hear any
Well,
of this.
just because you work there doesn't mean you're going to be consuming alcohol. I worked in the tech department, and guess what? They have a lot of virtual reality stuff, and they also support a lot of cool businesses. That's what, like, you know, appealed to me, not the alcohol. But it was definitely fun working there. So I started as a designer, and I was, you know, thinking of writing code to build out certain solutions for them. But that's where my supervisor there introduced me to the product world. And she said, well, you're working in tech, you have some design, you know how to code, how about you get into product? And that's how I got in to this space and how I ended up at Microsoft as a program manager. Like I just basically went from coding to designing to product. So here I am. That's kind of like my journey throughout my 3 internships before I graduate this December.
Wow, yes, it's super cool, like how diverse your different internships have been. Like you've done a ton and you haven't even graduated yet. It's awesome.
Well, I try because before getting into tech, all I used to do was draw. Like I've been drawing since I could hold a pencil. So I've always just been a designer. So for my second internship, when I had the opportunity to get into like UX side of things, even like understand the research aspect of it, I think just having that introduction to how data can drive design for user interfaces and so on, and also be able to like code that out. It was definitely really awesome and helped me kind of prepare for the product journey, because so much of it is really understanding and empathizing with users. And I think just having that background in design really helped. So yeah, I truly enjoyed my journey. I explored, and I'm still exploring. Like my next stop is cybersecurity. So here I am.
Nice, awesome. Yeah, so the build has finished, and so you can even see that it printed out the URL here. So I'm just going to click on that, and this is showing the live site that hopefully is working. Yep, it is working. So so you can see this is accessing the same database as we're talking to locally, which is why you see the map and the like the little things in the same places. So so let's see if we can quickly add a couple of things here, because I don't want to run out of time. Let's see. So I think the next thing that we want to do is we actually want to basically respond to a click on the map, and then we want to update, our coordinate that's on the map. So so let's do that now. So yeah, we've actually seen that the code that Copilot recommended actually works, so I don't have to even keep the one that I wrote around. And we're going to start from this. So the first thing we want to do is figure out how to do other events. So let's go back to my browser here, and Azure Maps, click event. Now you can see I've searched for this before. So how to handle map events. So once again, I'm going to do the same thing as I did before, which is just look around to see what's going on. Actually, it's interesting. Like this one is saying, like, wait for the map to be ready. Is that a better event to listen for? I don't know. Okay, well, anyway, ours is working, so let's leave it the way it is. Though ready sounds better. Okay,
If
maybe
it
I'll
works,
change it to
don't
ready.
question it.
I don't know. I think I used ready before, and I trust it more, so I'll switch it. So somewhere here, it's got to be like add an event for something. What is it doing? It's doing something really fancy here. Okay, so there's a bunch of events, and they use it somewhere. Is there a loop? Oh, there it is. Okay. Just add events. Oh, that's no good. I want to know what a click event looks like. Well, this is not useful. That's okay. Okay, so we're just going to add an event called click, and then see what happens. So so it's going to take basically a name of an event, which is called click. So you can see click over here. So if I click on the map, you can see that click lights up. And I need to give it a function that gets called whenever whenever the click happens. So we'll figure this out. So here, what we'll do is when the map is ready, we're going to add an event called click. How did it know this? Okay.
It's reading your mind.
I know. It's got to stop. Okay, you got to stop. Doesn't know how to finish this though, which I still have to type myself. Does it know what E does then? Because I'm trying to figure out what E is. Fine. So I'm actually going to go console log E, and then we're going to find out what E is. So I'm just going to go that, and then going to go back to. Do I still have this thing running? I do. Good. So back to my local version, not to be confused with the cloud version. Refresh it, and I'm going to open up the web dev tools, and I'm going to just click somewhere. And you can see every time I click, I'm logging out that event. So that event has a bunch of stuff that I don't care about, but it has a position. So it looks like it has the longitude and latitude right here. So it's under an array called position. So I think I'll try to use that information. So So basically, is it longitude and latitude? How do I destructure an array in? Oh, okay, maybe like that. How does it know that I want to do this? Longitude, latitude. Yeah, that's exactly what I want. So I want longitude, latitude. Okay, it knows way too much. And it knows I want to do this too, which is wild. So this is close. This returns a promise. So I actually need to use async and await here. Aside from that, I think it's doing the right thing. So this is actually called
people.
It's called creator update person.
Oh, okay.
I'm bad at naming things.
I'm learning as I go. Like, I'm surprised every time the Copilot does that.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's anyone watching who's like really into RESTful APIs, and they might be complaining in chat that I'm not using RESTful APIs, like proper resources and stuff. Yeah, I think in my actual sample that I wrote, the live one, I am using RESTful APIs. I'm not going to really kind of go into that too much here, but there is like a pretty standardized way of like writing APIs these days called RESTful APIs, where use verbs as well as it's basically like these routes that represent resources to kind of like to model your API. So for instance, to create a person, you typically would post to /API/people, and that's how you add one thing to a collection. And then to read back a person, you might go do a get from /API/people /anthonychu, for example, and that fetches one person, or you go /API/people to retrieve all of them. So that's called, like, a lot of people call that a RESTful API, and that's something you should strive for, so that your API looks nice and it's kind of like it abides by a lot of these standards. But for now, like we're not going to do that here. I can share a sample later where I've done that. So let's see. So we have done this. This actually all looks great. Yeah, so in JavaScript here, you have the name and the value are the same. You can actually shorten it. I think most browsers support this version of ECMAScript now. Just to simplify things. Maybe Copilot can learn something from me. Or maybe we'll find out that actually doesn't work, and then Copilot will be like, haha. But so anyway, what we want is that we're going to take that position and post it. So the one thing that's missing is the ID, which I'll kind of show you later on about how to actually get it from the logged in user. But right now I'm just going to hard code it, and I need a comma. So it's basically going to pass that. I think that might just work. I don't know. Let's see. We'll refresh. Because I don't trust myself, I'll keep this thing open down below there. Maybe we'll dock it to the side. Okay, I'm going to click. And nothing happened, which I think is good because I removed the console log. So I can go and look at the network. And then, okay, maybe it was a bad idea to do that here. I can see that create or update person was called. It was actually successful. So I think it worked. And then the other way to confirm it is if I kind of go back to my console here, I can see that this thing was called. It was executing create or update person. It actually worked and returned a 200. So it looks like everything is good, which means if I go and refresh this page, I would have moved myself into Northern Canada, which is, I don't know, sounds like a nice place to be. Yeah, and if I click here again and then refresh, yeah, you can see that I moved a bit again, or I can go to South America. Yay! So this thing is pretty much fully working now in terms of like the clicking part. So and clicking is only going to move me around because I hard coded my name, which is okay. And then we can actually do other things too. We can actually implement. Like I think earlier on, we saw that you can create a marker that was draggable. And you can actually probably, implement one where, when you drag and drop a marker, that's when you update it. I actually couldn't figure it out the first time I built it, which is why I just did the clicking thing. So yeah, let's go ahead and push that first. So that's add updating location. Like I said, this is hard coded, so if people are clicking around on the deployed version, I'll just be moving around the world. But now let's kind of do this last piece, which is to use, like, basically have somebody log in so that they hold on, let me have a drink of water. So that somebody can log in, and then they can only log in using GitHub, and then they can only move their avatar around, not somebody else's. So this should be fairly easy, I hope. If not, then we're here for a while. So we don't have to do anything to get people. So the main thing that we have to change here is, this is the function currently that we're calling to create or update the person. It's pretty simple. So there's a couple of things that we need to do. Maybe I'll actually show you. Yeah, let's see what I can show you right now. I actually didn't think about how we're going to show this. Okay, so I have the static web app running locally. So this is localhost, right? And like I said before, if I go to API/people, get people, it kind of returns it calls the API. But static web apps actually comes with some other things too. We saw how it can serve static files. We saw how it can kind of execute some API functions. But it also comes with a built-in authentication capability. So out of the box, it will support things like GitHub, I think Azure Active Directory, and maybe a couple other kind of providers out of the box. You don't have to do anything. So when running locally, we allow you to kind of emulate that. So static web apps comes with a bunch of URLs, and maybe I'll kind of quickly kind of search for Azure static web apps authentication. And it kind of tells you that there are these special URLs that you can use, that you can send the user to, that will log them in. That's what I'll kind of do here. So where am I going? Back to my.
So there is an anonymous question for you, which is, if you accidentally expose your connection string, can you replace it?
Yeah, so you can just click the little refresh thing next to the connection string, and then they'll generate a new one. So basically any secret that's in Azure, you can do that. And I would highly recommend that I do that after the stream. So anyway, I have this thing open. And so basically, I kind of just took this. So if I want somebody to log in using GitHub, I basically just send them here. So that's what I'm going to do. So in my static web app, I will send them off to the GitHub login. And in the cloud, when it's running in the cloud, it's actually going to send you to GitHub and you have to log in. But locally, we actually don't even require you to do this because a lot of folks actually want to test locally with, just kind of pretending to be somebody else. So if I want to log in as Nuzhat, I can do that. So I can basically fill in any value I want to log in as. I can even give myself some extra roles, but by default, these are the roles that I'm given. And I'll log in. So now I'm actually logged in to my app. So when I'm logged into the app, I can, when I call my function /API/get people, for example, actually, yeah, that's actually an okay one. I should receive, I'm actually calling this thing here. I should receive a user. This information is encoded in the header of the request. And we actually have some documentation here about how to access that information. So in JavaScript, I think this is a JavaScript example here. I basically have to pull out this header, I have to decode it and all that, and then I can parse it. So I can do that here. Yeah, and actually, maybe I will do that here. There's actually an easier way to do this now. This was recently added to Azure Functions, and you do need to use like Node 16, I think, for this. And that is, you can actually access the user in the request. So, so you can say const user equals request dot user type spell or anything. And I'll just console log that out. Oh, why can't I spell? Okay, console log user. If you like semicolons, we'll put one there too. I'll save it. So now when I go and look at the thing here, and I'll refresh, because I'm logged in, you can see that I actually have a user there. So, and then the user has an ID or username. So I can use the username from that. So what I can do with this now is, let me close it. I actually don't need this code here. I need it in my create or update person code. So I'll paste that in here. So, so first of all, if the user doesn't exist, I just want to basically say this is bad. There's many ways to say this. You can say status is 401. I assume it's correct because, you know, Copilot told me that it's correct. I don't know. But if user does exist, actually, and also have to return, otherwise it's going to keep going, and that's not going to be useful. So the only way that this code is going to execute is if a user exists. So, and I also want to make sure that the user username also exists. If neither of those exists, then, you know, this person was not logged in. So, so now I have this person, but I can't trust what's passed in, because right now in my HTTP request, I can pass in anyone I want here, right? And it'll just happily use it. But I don't want that. I want to use the person who's actually logged in. So I can just make a small change here and go person.id equals, for some reason it knows that I want user.username. So yeah, so like this guarantees that I'm only, like, you know, like this, the logged in person can only update the document that they that belongs to them and nobody else's. So they can pass in any user ID they want. It doesn't matter. Other things that we might want to do here, you know, Nuzhat, you kind of talked about cybersecurity earlier. You know, like you might want to think about other things that people can do to kind of hack your API. So another thing that might be that they might just want to use this thing to just store all sorts of data, because Cosmos DB allows you to basically just give it any JSON and it'll store it. You know, it might, you know, they might actually give you, like, you know, a giant document to store. I don't know. Who knows what else people might want to do with this. So potentially we might want to just make sure that we only extract the ID and the longitude and latitude from the incoming request, and maybe even do validation on it to make sure that longitude and latitude are numbers and they're within the valid ranges and all of that stuff before we save it. But because I'm lazy, this is the only part I'll do, and that should be fine. So I think we've done all this. I think this should just work. Maybe, I don't know. I'm waiting for people in the chat to tell me that something's gonna go boom, but we'll see. So let me refresh. I will show the browser dev tool so we can see what's going on here. So if I click, you can see it's still returning 200. Oh, actually, you know what? There's a it's going to work regardless, because what I did in the where am I? In the index.html, it's here. I'm always putting anthonychu. I'm actually going to not pass anything in. This is going to be longitude and latitude, and this is going to append the username that I have. So if I did that and I refresh, so now I'll clear this so that it's a little more clear what's happening. And I'll just click, maybe I want to go to Alaska or something. So here is the request. You can see that I sent in a payload that only has longitude and latitude, but the response actually includes my user ID, and that's because it pulled it from here, right? And then it returned it, so it's working. So so hopefully that's all that we need to do to allow people to log in and modify their own. Let's see, how much time do we have left? Okay, so maybe I'll spend 10 more minutes on this, and then we'll kind of bring Shreya back and we can chat about stuff and answer questions and stuff. So another thing that we might want to do is we might not even want people to even call this function at all if they're not logged in. That would be even more secure thing to do. So we can do that. Before I do it, I want to save my changes because I like them. Maybe like use login or something. Okay. And then should I push it? Yeah, I'll just push it. And then so the build's going to happen, but we're not going to worry too much about that. What was I going to do? Brain fog is kicking in. I was going to add basically prevent people from even hitting that URL if they're not logged in. So another thing that static web app supports, and I can do this from within Visual Studio Code if I have the static web apps extension installed, is that I can create a configuration file, and I can tell it where to put it. And the place that we need to put it is actually inside of the app folder. So there's a tip there to put it there. So there's different things that we can do here. So a very common thing that you'll need for basically any front-end framework other than this really simple app that I'm building here, which doesn't need it, is this thing called a navigation fallback. A lot of front-end frameworks do client-side routing. So the routes are currently only known to the client-side app. So so sometimes, like if you send somebody a deep link to your app, the server actually doesn't know that that file actually doesn't exist, but your client knows, but your client side code knows about it. So in that case, you want to set up a navigation fallback so that anytime somebody hits anything that or tries to request anything that doesn't exist, we'll just serve back the index.html, which is your React app or your Next app or something like that, and that thing, it's going to handle the routing. We don't need to know too much about this at all, so I'll delete that. We do need some routes though. So what I said I wanted to do is I wanted to lock down the route. No, this thing is confusing me. Stop. I don't want.
So while you're writing that out, there are actually two questions for you.
Okay.
One in the chat, which is quick question: is context.bindings.person equals to person updating location every time we refresh? And the second question is, can you explain client-side routing more?
Yeah. Okay, cool. Let me finish my thought first, because a lot of things already. 8%. So that's the route I want to protect. I can say I want to protect a certain method, but in this case, I don't really care. I want to protect them all. And I want to say allowed roles should be authenticated. So what I'm saying here is that for anyone to hit this route, they have to be authenticated. And we can also add another thing here too. Is that going to even help? No, it's not going to help. You can also do things like right now this is an API. So so typically an API call we don't really have to worry about redirecting the user to like a login page. An API is actually would prefer to get like a like a status 401 response, so that the caller, in this case my JavaScript that's running in the browser, can do the right thing. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. So that's gonna lock down that route. If we can go back to that first question, I think it was about something here. Do you mind repeating?
Yeah, the context.bindings at person equals to person, is that updating the location every time we refresh?
So it's not updating every time we refresh. So so this line here is updating the person. So it's taking what we pass in, and then we're updating that with the latest longitude and latitude. But when this is called, the only time that this is called is when somebody clicks somewhere, right? So this code here only executes when we click on a map, and then it's going to call it, and it's going to pass the longitude and latitude, and that's what gets saved to the database. So it's not going to be called every time we refresh the map. It's every time you click on the map. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. And the other question was, can we explain a little bit more about client-side routing? Yeah, so in client-side frameworks like React or Next, for instance, they basically implement this thing called client-side routes, which when you kind of click around and kind of browse around, your browser kind of URL changes. But that routing happens entirely in JavaScript. So, which means that it's only known to the app that's running in your browser. So, for instance, you might click around on an app and you will end up in at a route called /products/123, and React or Next will know about this app, this route, and it knows how to basically display the right UI, as well as kind of like call the right APIs and stuff to render this page. But that's only when React is running in the browser. So if somebody takes that URL in the location bar, and then say I sent that to you, and then you punched it in to your browser, basically the URL / or the domain / product/123, it's going to go and ask for that file or basically ask for that resource from the web server. And the web server is like, I don't know what /product/123 is. I don't know anything about this. Like, the only file that I have is index.html plus a bunch of other JavaScript files. I don't know what you're talking about. So in a typical web server, it'll just return a 404, and then your user will be sad. And the only way to for them to fix it is if they kind of just removed everything after it, and just basically just went to the domain. They're going to get to the roots of the React app, and they have to go and browse to your product and then kind of find it again. So the way around this is to basically set up that navigation fallback rule, which says is basically telling it that anytime you basically get a request that you don't understand, just return the index.html. So what happens is somebody's going to request /product/123. The contents of index.html is going to get returned, and then the React or Next or whatever app is going to load up in the browser, and it's going to look on the URL and be like, oh, I'm actually on product/123. So let me go and render that UI and make the right calls to actually render that page, so that you actually see the product 123 on your screen. So that's kind of how client-side routing works, and that's pretty much universal now across pretty much all the frameworks, because we still want to mimic like what you kind of have in a server-side rendered application. So you still have these routes that you can bookmark and send to your friends and share on social media and stuff. But you do need some special treatment on the server side to make sure that that the app still loads up properly. And in static web apps, you do that by adding this rule. Hopefully that answers the question. If not, ask more. What did I just do? So I added the config and all that. So I think I'll just do literally just do one more thing, which is, that'll probably be a lie because there'll probably be more things. But The only thing I can think of right now is that I think what I can do here is if response dot, I think it's status and equals 401. I don't want to alert the person. So dot location dot href equals, I want to send them to the login page. This is pretty close, but that's not what I want. So it's the dot auth slash login slash GitHub earlier. So basically what's going to happen is if somebody clicked on a map and they're not logged in, I think this thing is going to return a 401 now. And then and if I see a follow 401, I will just send them off to GitHub and then they can log in. So hopefully that works. And we're not going to implement logout because I think that's a lot of work. Well, not a lot of work. It's just a different path. I can show you logout right now. So right now I'm still logged in into the browser, but if I go /auth/logout, it basically clears the cookie. So I'm no longer logged in. So now what you would expect to see here, if I click somewhere, oh shoot, it's 500. Why is it 500? That's not what I expected. Well, I don't like that. Okay, fine. I don't know why it's 500. Maybe I should care, but let's. Oh, you know why? I think it's still calling through, and for some reason, I have some bad logic in my app. Maybe I'm not checking the right things. Yeah, because basically what I did was yeah, let me just show you that from scratch. I still have this server running, and because I just added that config file, it doesn't know anything about it. So I'm going to just stop it. And then, oh, you know what? Well, two things. I want to tell you what I did wrong first. Okay, so the first thing is because I did not restart the static web app CLI, I actually didn't pick up that new config file I added. So it did not protect that route, which is fine. It's still called the URL, or it's still called the function. But I think what I did in the function was that I had some bad logic here. So I think this should be if not user. Oh my gosh, why am I drawing a blank? If not user or user or not user.username. I think this is going to do it. Yeah. So like I basically had some really bad logic here. And I think you can probably even simplify this more. Yeah, you can actually change this to dot question mark here. Question mark dot. I think this works. Maybe I broke it some more. I don't know. But it doesn't matter. So basically I had some bad logic in my conditional here. But I'm going to go ahead and restart the CLI. So it should now, whether it's hitting this code or hopefully it's doing this other thing, it's going to return a 401. So I'm going to just refresh this page just to be sure. And then I will click. Did I click? Oh, there it is. Oh yeah, see, I got a 401. But it didn't actually do the thing I wanted to do, which was redirect. I guess it doesn't really matter at this point. Status is greater than 500. Did I get any? I did. Oh yeah. Well, when in doubt. Oh, more bad logic. Are people like catching this in the chat and talking about how terrible of a coder I am? Greater than equal to 500.
They're not talking about how bad of a coder you are, but I feel like other people are also trying to solve this with you.
Okay, thanks.
Mark mentioned that status is not greater than 500 in this case.
Thanks. Yeah, see.
And also that
Mark's got my
console.log.
back. There we go. So now if I click on it, I actually got a 401, and it's actually going to do the redirect. I think it's going to do the right thing, and I can log in. And now when I click again, right, say I wanted to go to like, the US somewhere, that should work because I'm logged in. So yeah, so I think my app works. So I'm going to stop this. Let's quickly deploy it. We can have a quick chat and then we can see it live. And yeah, let's see. So make it work.
Fingers crossed.
There we go. Sent it up there. All right. So any questions from the chat? Console log is our friend. Yes. Yes, it's excellent. There's actually ways to actually set up Visual Studio Code to press F5 and actually debug a lot of this stuff. Yeah, I just didn't have time to set that up today. But yeah, the static web apps extension actually helps you so that if you had say a React app for the front end and a function app in the back end, you can actually press F5. The static web app CLI will start up behind the scenes. And then you can actually hit your app just like I did locally at port 4280 or whatever. But when you can actually set breakpoints in your React app in your front end, as well as breakpoints in your API in the back end. So you actually don't have to use console.log if you don't want to. And actually like inspect live, even in your React app, what's going on.
Awesome. This is going really well so far. I just wanted to point out that, things always go wrong sometimes. And it's nice to kind of see someone like Anthony just like debugging and like how your brain works when you're trying to figure out what went wrong. Anthony, do you have any other recommendations when your code's just not working the way you want it to and you're trying to resolve those issues?
I think I probably have a few. So one, you kind of saw that I always made small changes and then I tested it. So a test could be you actually, just refreshing a browser and trying it out. You can actually write automated tests for a lot of this stuff. But I think the key is to make small changes and check it so that when something goes wrong, it has to be the last 2 lines of code that you wrote, not the last 500, and then try to figure out what part of that went wrong. And also, deploy often, which is why I'm kind of really recommending folks kind of setting up the deployment early on, so that you can actually test this out in production. So, but then really just debugging is, in a sense, it's some of it is experience. So a lot of it I just knew because I saw the error message saying that something was undefined. I was like, okay, I must have referenced something wrong here or had the wrong logic. But yeah, a lot of it is just, you just have to go through it a couple of times and eventually you get better and better at it. But I do kind of try to recommend, like for something that's a browser talking to an API, that you do open up the browser dev tools. So that's Command Option I in a Mac and Command or Control, I don't know, F12. I think it's on the PC. And here you can usually see stuff that's happening. So either JavaScript errors or issues with the API call there, you saw earlier with the 500. That really kind of quickly tells you front end or back end, right? Then you can kind of focus. So always try to figure out, where it is and try to find somewhere in the middle so that you can kind of divide your search into, just half of it and kind of focus on half of it.
Yeah, for sure. I haven't actually used Copilot yet, so it's really interesting to see how that works in real life. But if you are a student, possibly that might not be the best solution to go when you have like a bunch of lines added to your code and you don't really know what's happening.
Yeah, it's an interesting technology, but and I think it does help people learn stuff if you actually read what it's doing. But if it's giving you a bunch of code, and especially if it's like subtly wrong and you can't quite figure out what's going on, then I think that's where you might run into a bit of trouble.
Yeah. Also, I see Mark's comment that he uses SWA for demos. What is SWA? I don't know.
Static web apps.
Oh, static web apps. Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
So hopefully this works now. If I click here, you can see that it takes me to a login. So I can go and authorize and log in. I am now logged in. more lawyer stuff. And then I'm here. So now I can, like, if I want to go to Australia. Oh, shoot. If I want to go to Australia. I think I might have coded this wrong.
No.
Well, it doesn't matter. Well, like I think we're close, but I do want to kind of point out a couple things with the live version that we deployed that I did not have time to cover, and then kind of give you the URL to that. Oh, I don't have the repo yet. We'll have it in the recording, or we'll find a way to kind of share with you. But I will kind of show you really quickly. This is the live version, github-map.anthonychu.dev. If anyone wants to go there and add themselves to it. I just have to warn you, there's no delete button. You have to call me if you want to remove yourself from this map. But you can go to, go to this URL if you can see it on the screen. So one thing that I do want to point out that's kind of interesting is that we didn't have time to cover is that if I open this up in two browsers, and I start moving myself around in one, you can see that it actually moving me around in this other browser and hopefully everyone else's browser too. It's using a service in Azure called SignalR service that allows us to really easily use real-time updates or do things with real-time updates in a browser like this, or even in other clients too. And I'll kind of quickly find the code that I'll point out. It's literally 2 lines of code that I added to make this work. Where do I have it? It's fine. So I kind of, this is the source for the live version. I can make this public later. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I just want to kind of quickly point out, this is exactly what we built before. But in this function here, we have something a little bit extra. So I have to find an extra output binding. So I have an output binding for Cosmos DB. I created one for SignalR service as well. And what that allows us to do is, this is the lines that saves to our database that we have in the app that we just wrote. But also have this other line here that basically sends that same person to SignalR service. And then SignalR service is going to behind the scenes relay it to everywhere. And in order to implement it in our UX in our UI, that's fairly simple as well. Or there's actually an extra thing that you have to add here. But all that is here. But I'll just kind of quickly point out the JavaScript code that was needed to make this happen. It wasn't much. It was like literally this chunk here. So establish a connection. Whenever I receive the person changed message that I sent from my function, then I just basically find the right marker and I update it. And if it's a new marker, I add a new marker on the screen. And then I start the connection. So it's actually really, about 20 lines of code that I added to do that real-time capability. So yeah, just want to point that out.
Awesome.
And Scott's added himself there. Awesome.
Yeah. Once we have this code live publicly, we'll go ahead and share that in the Discord. And if students have questions about what you just spoke about, we'll get those answered as well. But yeah, that was really cool. Nuzhat, is there anything else you want to add to the demo or anything?
Well, I see a question, I think, in the anonymous tab. So I'm just going to read that out. For Nuzhat, could you talk more about your internship experience and what you are working on? What are some skills that you have learned from this internship? So I can just quickly go over how I take on my internships generally is that I like to have one project that I don't know anything about that I want to learn from and one project that I'm actively contributing to. So overall at Microsoft, I've been working closely with designing mockups and specifically to improve user experience for certain items on the Azure portal. So that is one item that I'm learning from. But at the same time, since I've worked as a designer, especially in the user experience research side of things, I'm contributing to customer interviews, meaning that kind of like that's almost like a research way of finding out what users of static web apps need. So we on the Microsoft end can facilitate and cater to those needs of developers around the world who are using static web apps. So I think that's really cool to be able to have that impact on developers. So the key skill that I get to learn, which I think I'm super lucky to have the opportunity for, is just watching the process of innovation. It's really witnessing how a company like Microsoft goes from point A to point B, which is delivering large scale projects and products, and how people around the world use it, and being able to be a part of that innovation process, which is not often overnight, is really something that I'm learning a lot from.
Awesome. And in terms of the skills that you've learned, is there anything specific, like technical, non-technical, that you want to share with people?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of both. So in school, like in college, and also just like at my previous internships where I was a software developer, I've primarily learned how to code. So in this internship, I'm really getting to use that skill of being able to code to look through the lenses of other users and what users of static web apps and what developers might be looking for. So I think a key skill that I'm deploying here and learning from is empathy, like user empathy, which is pretty big at Microsoft. And just being able to incorporate the technical side of it is great, because that's, I think, what the program manager role is really about, just catering to the needs of users. So empathy, I would say, is a skill that's not always like it doesn't come like all the time with everyone, like naturally. So just being able to learn and deploy that into work has been like a key skill that I'm using in this internship experience.
Awesome. And Anthony, is there anything that you've learned from Nuzhat or from your experience working with her?
Yeah, I've learned a ton from Nuzhat. Like I think she accomplished so much, and like I was saying earlier, like even before she graduated. Um, yeah, she only really just introduced herself to like half the things she's kind of working on. So yeah, it's been awesome working with Nuzhat and having her on the team. And yeah, like we hire a bunch of interns at Microsoft every summer, so we're like really fortunate to have folks like Nuzhat join us. So yeah, hopefully we'll actually see some folks from the camp join us in future years as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and add both of your personal LinkedIn, Twitters in the description of the recording afterwards. So for anyone that's watching later, if you want to connect with Nuzhat and Anthony, you should go ahead and do that. If you have any questions about their experiences working or interning at Microsoft, feel free to ask them. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us and walking us through this workshop today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and end it now. Bye.